Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today is December 19th, 2024, and let's get to the news and updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? Before I begin, I just want to let you guys know that for the next 2 weeks, I will be in a remote location with very limited internet access, so it's very likely that I won't be able to post videos for the next 2 weeks. I'll try to maybe squeeze 1 or 2 videos if I have the time, but just be aware that I might not be posting videos for the next few weeks until early January. So please, I hope you can understand that. I hope you can live through that. There's many other great channels that will be giving you updates, and rest assured that I will come back for 2025 with more videos, more content, and of course I will try to make perhaps a stream over the next few weeks with you guys. It's been a while since I've done one. So without further ado, let's get to some important news for today. And I think the most important one was Putin's press conference, end of year press conference for 2024, where essentially he had admitted a lot of bad negative news related to Russia, admitted kind of the difficulties that Russia's undergoing, and the fact that, well, he did not say that, but in my opinion, he understands very well that Russia is in deep, and you guys can finish that last word. Essentially, the first thing he mentioned is that he doesn't know when Russia is going to be able to take back the Western Kursk region. Essentially saying that I have no timeline, but of course we will take it back. So this is Putin admitting that it's going to take longer than expected, and there's a lot of frustrated residents. There's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of displaced residents from Kursk that are anxiously waiting to get back, but again, month by month, everything gets pushed. And we know that, of course, this week, North Korean troops have started engaging Ukrainian troops in Kursk. The casualties seem to be around 1,000 so far for the North Koreans, and about 100 to 200 dead already in less than a week. So this is a catastrophic loss for the North Korean military. But as I've said, I wouldn't be surprised if Kim Jong-un doubles down and continues sending more men over the next few months. Additionally, he also talked about Trump and future negotiations, and he admitted as well that he hasn't talked to him in more than 4 years, and he is ready, of course, for peace talks, whatever that means, because we know that Putin has not been talking with the language of compromise. He has been talking with the language of ultimatums, saying that Ukraine cannot be part of NATO, Ukraine cannot be part of the European Union, Ukraine needs to give up all the 4 oblasts and territory that Russia doesn't control even. Ukraine needs to have a limited military, pretty much telling Ukraine that you're going to lose your entire independence and then we'll agree to a ceasefire. Like, it's ridiculous. So, of course, we can't trust whatever he's saying with regards to I'm ready for peace talks. And I've told you guys that Putin is very interested in pretending to be ready for peace talks and trying to buy time, with the West being fooled again that, oh, look at Russia, they're willing to negotiate. Look at them, they're willing to compromise. They're finally understanding that, you know, we need to sit on the negotiating table. Well, that's definitely not going to be in the plans for Putin. Also, he talked about, and that's probably the most ridiculous part of this press conference, he suggested a high-tech duel between the West and Russia to test his claims of his Oryashnik intercontinental ballistic missile, and that it's impervious to air defenses. And he stated that let the West set some targets to be hit, let's say in Kyiv. They will concentrate all their air defenses there, and we will launch an Oryashnik strike there and see what happens, right? Just completely mentally unstable statement by Putin. But then again, he has done a lot of other mentally unstable decisions in the last few years. He also talked about Assad's fall, and that's not surprising. He said that what is happening in Syria, they're trying to push it as a defeat for Russia, but I assure you it is not. We have achieved our goals. Of course, you've achieved your goal if it's being driven out of your bases, losing billions of dollars worth of investments in Syria, then sure, you have achieved that goal for sure, Putin. He also talked about the assassination of a prominent general in Moscow the last few days. And he was in charge of the chemical and nuclear forces, if I remember correctly, General Kirillov, who was assassinated by Chinese e-scooter. So I can only wish more e-scooters for every single Russian general. And he talked about how this is very worrisome and that I can't believe that we missed this. We need to improve this work, and we must not allow such very serious blunders to happen, because this was certainly a big blow. You guys know that the last few days I've been covering special Ukrainian sabotage missions and, of course, assassinations over the last few months of prominent generals, propagandists, people that work for the Putin regime and facilitate his entire war. And these are legitimate targets. Ukraine is not targeting innocent people here. They are essentially part of this Putin system, this regime, and they're facilitating his work in killing innocent Ukrainian civilians. So they are absolutely legitimate targets. So he is admitting here that this was a serious Russian fail in terms of preventing this assassination, which has deep, again, reverberations within the Kremlin elite, because over the last few days, I've been hearing a lot of these Russian propagandists saying that they're afraid now when they come out of their cars and they see people driving in their e-scooters. You know, usually those that drive these e-scooters are food delivery people. And one even admitted during Soloviev Live, one of those propagandists in Russia, one of the guests admitted that he was afraid of coming out of his car when he saw somebody driving an e-scooter, because he thought that maybe he was the next one in the list. So it really tells you that this has also serious psychological effects on the Kremlin elites. And it's not just the generals, but it's the propagandists, the scientists, and the engineers working for this Putin, this oppressive Putin regime. And he also talked about the economic headwinds that are facing Russia. He admitted that the inflation is a worrying signal, and that the price rises for foods such as butter, which have increased over the last few years by 30 to 35%, and some other staple foods have increased to up to 50%, like I think onions and potatoes, 70%, and meat were unpleasant. So the price rise, the price rise of foods is just unpleasant. But you know that it's catastrophic for many Russians when already they were living paycheck to paycheck, barely getting by. And now the price of potatoes or other staple foods are going as high as 70% compared to 2-3 years ago. It's absolutely devastating for the ordinary Russian. So I think that it really shows to us how dire the situation in Russia is, and Putin starts to admit more and more of these negative news in his press conferences. And I think it's a way for him to kind of release some of that public pressure, allow the Russians to voice their unhappiness. But let's not pretend that's going to change something. Russians are perfectly happy with this war. Still, a grand majority of Russians support the Putin regime. They support the war in Ukraine. And I just think that, you know, the reality of things is that the only way Putin is going to fall is if the elites turn against him. That's the most important. I don't think, and I don't believe that the Russian people will somehow be able to topple Putin at this stage. It's impossible. It's only the elites, similar to a Prigozhin mutiny in the future. So that's the first piece of news I want to cover. Now, the next one is some positive news for Ukraine for the end of the year. Aside from the massive packages that Ukraine has been receiving from the US, as Biden is trying to really supercharge the Ukraine military with the last few billions left to in military assistance left for Ukraine. You also see a lot of announcements from European countries, the UK, Switzerland, and Denmark are allocating over $600 million USD of military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Of course, Switzerland is providing winter aid, being that they're a neutral country. And to be fair, 48 million isn't that much, but still appreciated. You can see that UK is pledging a military aid package of $286 million for Ukraine, and Denmark is also allocating 280 million euro military aid package to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. So you can see that European countries continue pledging more military aid, and it shows that Europe, again, is becoming more and more decisive, and they will not abandon Ukraine. They will continue taking part, an important role, an important part in assisting Ukraine with this new Trump era, knowing that Trump is a destabilizing factor. Trump is kind of on the edge in the sense that we don't know if he's going to really provide more support to Ukraine or not. I have reason to believe that he definitely will continue to support Ukraine, albeit perhaps not the same level that we've seen under the Biden administration. But I think that the longer this war drags on for and Trump takes official presidency next year, and he's already admitted that this war isn't as simple as he thought it would be, or ending the war. Trump understands very well as every day go by, that's basically it's not something that you can simply resolve in a phone call or in 24 hours, as he stated during the election, that, I'll give a phone call to Zelensky and Putin and we'll just resolve this in less than 24 hours. I think that Trump understands very well at this stage the reality that this is a very complex war and it's going to take very complex solutions to resolve it. And I'll talk about it in my next slide here. And I want to just thank the UK, Switzerland, Denmark, and other countries that have been providing assistance to Ukraine. Thank you so much. So for the last one is Mr. Keith Kellogg is expected to visit Kyiv soon. And this is more of a fact-finding mission rather than the initial phase of active negotiations. So he's expected to meet with senior Ukrainian officials in Kyiv in early January. He's also arranging meetings with other leaders in Europe, including France and Italy, and perhaps the UK, who knows. And the itineraries might change as well. So it's not definitive with regards to which country in Europe he's going to visit, but it's more of a fact-finding mission. And he noted again that Trump has a big desire to quickly bring an end to the war between Ukraine and Russia. I just want to put my small thoughts about this because we've been talking a lot about Trump, about what the US is going to do, about what his administration is going to do. And I just need to highlight the fact that we're placing way too many expectations on Trump and his administration, what they will do, thinking that somehow that they have the answer and the key to the end of this war with a magical solution. As I've mentioned, this 24 hours, within 24 hours, I'll bring an end to the war. I'll give a quick phone call to all parties and we'll arrange something. This is not a business deal. This is a deep-rooted, complex war between two nations that have been waging this for centuries. The Russian-Ukraine war has not started 10 years ago. This is a centuries-long war between two different and deeply different ideologies. They're completely divided. And again, let's not forget that this is an existential threat for Ukraine. Any deal that will force Ukraine to abandon its sovereignty or weaken, a deal that weakens Ukraine, militarily speaking, and also diplomatically speaking, economically speaking, will be an existential threat to the Ukrainians. What we saw with Assad's fall, and the last few days we've seen even more grim pictures and videos of his regime and the system that he had set up, the concentration camps, and the hundreds of thousands of dead innocent civilians in these prison camps that were tortured, killed, God knows what else they did there. This is what Putin had in plan if he had a quick win in 2022. And he's not going to stir away from that. He still has that in his plans if he somehow becomes victorious in the future. So for Ukraine, this is an existential threat, and you simply cannot compromise on that. Rest assured that any compromise that is short-term, that is a half-assed solution to this war, sort of like a Minsk 3, will bring us back to the same situation in a few months or in a few years. Putin will continue pressing forward as soon as he feels weakness, until he continues feeling like he is winning this, that he has the advantage, that he somehow has more decisiveness than the West. He is not going to stop, and he's going to continue planning for his next move. And the problem is not just Putin, it's deeply rooted within the Russian society. And that requires a far more difficult solution as well. So thinking that somehow this is just a Putin problem, that, eventually Putin is going to go away and Russia is going to become more free, more democratic, or they'll change. You're deeply wrong. The Russians are supporting this. And even those that do nothing or don't care, and I've briefly mentioned that in one of my posts talking about the situation with a YouTuber that got arrested in Russia and was in deep trouble. he might have been there. He might have been convicted for years down the line in a Russian prison. Thankfully, he got away. His channel was sabbatical. But I talked about the fact that, like in the comment section of that video, many Russian viewers were saying, oh, we're not like that. Come back to Russia and I'll treat you right. And you'll see our spirit and our love and our welcomeness. Yeah, right. You haven't said anything about the Putin regime, about taking accountability that you've allowed the Putin regime to grow so strong and allowed these institutions in Russia to abuse their power, to be so repressive that you're complacent to it. So the problem is deeply rooted within Russian society. And this war will not end until Russia goes through a massive reform. How that's going to happen, I don't know. You guys can let me know in the comment section what your thoughts about a deep Russian reform is going to look like. But that can only happen truly if there is a collapse of the modern Russian Federation, a massive collapse. And we're seeing that Russia is heading towards that direction, economically speaking, militarily speaking, geopolitically speaking. Even internally, things are breaking down very quickly. 2025 will be a very interesting year because Putin, I think, is losing more and more of that grip on power, that ability to portray a winning image to the Russians. As the economy is collapsing, and it's just a question of when. You guys already know. You don't need to watch me. There's plenty of channels already discussing just the economic doom for Russia. And especially in 2025, I think there's high chances that by summer, fall of 2025, things might disintegrate completely. We know Russia's resilient. We know that Russia can last for very long. So same for Ukraine. But I don't think it's infinite. And 2025 could bring us a lot of surprises. And what we saw with the Syrian regime could very well happen to Putin in 2025. At least I'm very optimistic, but things can change, of course. And it all depends how decisive, again, the United States is, Europe, and all the Ukraine partners are at really ensuring that Ukraine wins this and is on the most superior position when time will come to have negotiations with Russia. That's absolutely important. So let me know what you guys think about any of these news today. I'm very grateful for your support. Again, as I've mentioned in the beginning of this video, I will be away for the next 2 weeks, so I apologize in advance that I'm not going to be able to make videos regularly, but I'm going to take some time off and be away from the computer. I'll try to make an update if there's a really big one to make, but in early January, I will come back to make videos again. So thank you so much for support, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!